check it out. This bike is completely decked out with SRAM's latest transmission drivetrain. It's also got Code Ultimate brakes. We've never seen those before either. Heaps of super exciting gear. The MY23 that they've just dropped right now. It's the end of March 2023. We've had an exclusive opportunity to actually test ride this gear for a few months now. You might have seen our video we did with Chris Mandel from SRAM where he gave us an overview of all of this stuff and basically ran us through the different features and different options that are in the market. But we saved our actual nitty-gritty in-depth review until now. Blake, you've been riding this bike, mate. How much riding have you done on this bike over the last 3 months?
So this has been the daily, this has been the go-to. We've ridden it in massive amounts of dust, mud, locally, down in Thredbo, all these types of places. So it's seen a very, very vast range of trails. Obviously we started off in Medina with it a few months ago, but it's seen a bunch of abuse, yeah, for sure.
There's two reasons I can tell that you're definitely telling the truth there as well. When we got this bike, it was fresh. Now this rear tyre is very worn. And there's an interesting detail on this derailleur, which we'll get to in a bit. And it's got some pretty big gouge marks. Interestingly, none of the metal is gouged. It's only these soft plastic parts. But the whole body of the derailleur is completely straight, completely flawless in performance. But yeah, that's a testament to some of those performance or durability elements that SRAM have built into the derailleur. We'll get on that later. Now, what used to be called a drivetrain, we learned in the last video, SRAM are now calling transmission. The reason basically being is that the derailleur now sits right up against the cassette. Now, Chris ran through the theory and it sounded awesome, but taking the Kool-Aid side apart or whatever you want to say, mate, how much of a difference does that make? You've ridden SRAM Axis from years previous. Jumping on this, is there a noticeable difference?
There is a considerable noticeable difference. Yeah, so my own bike, I've got the GX AXS grip set on it, and swapping and changing between the two on the same day, it's night and day difference. And I already thought that the original Axis was night and day difference over the previous, you know, the relics of cable. When was that? Whatever, 10 years ago, whatever that felt like. But the way that everything interfaces now and the added rigidity and stiffness is just making those shifts even more crisp. Like they're just so damn positive. Like it's nothing else we've ever experienced.
Now, is that both up and down the cassette?
Absolutely, yeah. So because we've got less interfaces now with the derailleur mounting directly to the frame through that clevis, it's just both up and down the cassette. Everything knows exactly where it is in time and space at all times. Nothing's moving, nothing's flexing, anything like that. It just shifts absolutely perfectly every time.
What's really interesting about that is the derailleur is a lot more solid now. Essentially it's connected through the entire rear end of the bike, directly mounted to the cassette, hugging both sides of the frame throughout UDH, the derailleur mount. But the actual derailleur itself has a lot more clearance. So the bulk of the derailleur is centered under the bike like we've never seen before. It's got a lot less mass out on the right hand side there, so a lot less is going to be in the way and vulnerable. All of those elements, like, does it feel like there's more heft, or does it actually feel when you're pedaling?
Not at all. So that's like a comment that I've received from a few people that have sort of seen it, close friends and that sort of thing, and they've said, oh, look, you know, I don't know how I feel about that. What happens when you do give it that big hit and it breaks? I'm convinced that this thing's not going to break. Like I said, we've got a few sacrificial pieces of armor on the outside which are going to stop from scuffs and bumps and that type of thing. You're able to keep the derailleur looking more clean and fresh. But like you said, nearly the whole derailleur is sitting underneath the chainstay now. It's so much further out of the way because they've gotten rid of that extra interface. It's just one whole unit now, which is why they're calling it the transmission. It's not a drivetrain made up of separate parts. It's all come together to be one transmission.
Tell us a bit about that armoring. So this is a modular derailleur. SRAM believe in their product. They realize that this gear is an investment for people. They want the stuff to work longer than ever before, to have more durability, a long lifespan, but they also want to continue looking fresh. They know that people want their bikes to look dope or look awesome. So tell us how they've achieved that in the derailleur. I've never seen this before.
100%. I think it's an absolutely great idea. So as we can see, we've got a few acetal or nylon, some type of plastic material that mounts from the back side of the derailleur. That's the furthest out part. So that's going to take any scuffs from rocks or dropping the bike, crashing it, throwing down the hill. They're very, very economical. They're very cheap to buy, purchase. They're going to be readily available. A couple of Allen key bolts, and you can swap those out, keeping it nice and fresh. You also notice that on this XX derailleur, the outer cage, the outer plate of the cage is kept raw aluminium. So this means you can just give it a little polish up and it's gonna look brand new compared to scuffing up the anodized. So it's, you know, night and day difference. Like you can take a derailleur that's 12 months old and for a few bucks and a bit of elbow grease, make it look brand new again.
Performance and durability. Now, one of the things, so I rode this transmission as well on a different bike down there at Medina. You might have seen that in that, caught that in that last video. Now, one of the things I noticed right away is when we first jump on a mountain bike on gears, back when you're a kid, or the first time you ever rode a mountain bike, whoever put you on the bike, the first thing they would have told you is when you're changing gears, you never change gears when you're pedaling or uphill. You always like back off and pedal lightly when you change your gears and then apply power. This throws that out the door. How have they done it, and how hard is it to get your idea around the height you can give it full gas, crunching gears, and it doesn't void warranty? In fact, it's encouraged by SRAM.
So that was actually something that Chris mentioned to us when we first got to see the bike and talk about the bike. Like we said, we were down in Medina, we thought we were doing shuttle runs all weekend and happy days. He did mention the first thing we're going to do is go and ride halfway up the hill, and we were both like, what are we doing that for? He said, I want you to shift under load riding up the steeper sections of the hill. And I said, well, that's, you know, like you said, that's against everything that I know about gears. The amount of times I've seen people snap chains, whether it's, you know, beginners or professionals over racing the cross-country World Cups and Enduro World Cups. I mean, we've all seen Aaron Gwynn snap the chain out of the start gate. But the way that the SRAM have redesigned the profile of the teeth on the cassette, now they're all narrow wide as well, bar one ring. Just the interface, and again, with the derailleur always being in that exact same position, it just means that you can shift under load, and it feels wrong. It feels so wrong for the first couple of days on the bike. But it's, once you get your head around it, it is the most advantageous thing I think I've ever experienced, bar maybe an e-bike in the last 10 years.
So it's such a get out of jail free card. Like you'll be, especially riding a blind trail, or if you slip up on a section of trail and around the corner there's like a log roller you got to get to. Normally you're like clicking up, trying to unweight, you're shifting your body weight forward. With this, you just, it takes the fear out of it. You just click gears,
100%.
It's good to go. And now let's have a quick chat about this chain. Obviously we've seen this style of chain with a flat top or flat bottom on the road market. This is the first time we've seen it on mountain bike. Now aesthetically it looks sick. But yeah, what are some of the differences you notice from this chain versus the chain on your old bike?
So the main differences between the flat bottom or flat top, as you mentioned, chain is SRAM have taken material away from where it doesn't need to be to keep a strong, stiff chain and added it back in that top or the bottom of that plate to keep the strength and the rigidity, but while also keeping the weight down. So you can actually feel, once you sort of wrap your head around the whole package, you can really feel that this chain is a bit stiffer and a bit stronger than chains of years past, like the more traditional design. Also, I feel like it's going to wear at a slower rate as well. Like obviously we have to bring maintenance into this and all that type of thing, keeping your chain clean. But because there's less material in certain places and more material in others, I think your longevity of your drivetrain is also going to benefit from this.
Perfect. Now, we talked about shifting and a positive click. Obviously the shape of the new derailleur, the more mass being closer, it's crisper. SRAM's always known as being the crispest kind of gear changes anyway. They've kind of gone up that ante. Now, one of the interesting ways is how those changes are made, and it used to be through the shifter, and now it's through something they call the pod. Really interesting design. Did it take long to get used to? Is it something you're actually digging? Does it seem like a fad? I mean, there's a lot of customization options, but give us a run through what it's like to live with this new shape of shifter.
So when we first saw the pods on the bikes, when we received them, I sort of thought they looked a little bit odd and a little bit out of place compared to the old design. But I guess this is all part of, you know, developing new products, and, you know, I'm sure the first people that saw the first Model T Ford were like, well, that looks different to my horse and cart. But once you actually get used to the ergonomics, which didn't take long at all, I was a bit sort of, oh, this might take a little while, but literally within the first couple of hours of riding, just the way the pod, for my hand at least, it felt so natural. You can get a couple of different profile buttons on these pods, and you can configure them any way you want. So we've now got 4 buttons between the 2 pods, so you can, you know, do E-tap type from the road cycling end of things, E-tap type shifting where you can shift up and down wherever you want. You can have your dropper post on the right hand side, all types of things. So that's really is quite a few options in there, which compared to, you know, the older type where you could swap whether it was up or down on either side. But yeah, it's really ergonomically like a game changer. So
there's a whole world of opportunities. We've got essentially 4 buttons, which you mentioned. Now, changing those settings, SRAM have always wanted to make the system as user-friendly as possible. They've just updated the app. I know you got early access to that and you've been playing around with it. So obviously in the app is where you can adjust those buttons, what the 4 of them do or don't do, which way, like a positive shift, sends the derailleur up or down. But tell us some of the other things about the app and some of the kind of features you're kind of digging off that versus the older app that's been available up to now and just been replaced.
So it's just general sort of bit of housekeeping, I guess you could say. Like, I thought the old app worked pretty well, but there was every now and then you could get a little bit of a glitchy sort of feeling from it. Nothing too bad, but it was a little bit clunky, I guess you could say, compared to, you know, the apps that everybody across the world uses every day. I guess that's the thing, like we're comparing a very niche thing compared to, you know, our Facebook app or something like that. So it's just really been refined in a massive, massive way, and it has really stepped up its game for sure.
Yeah, right. Now, the other big product announcement that we have, and we mentioned at the start here, is the brakes. So there's a bunch of new families from Level, which is that kind of trail through XC, but this is the code. We love codes. RSC's, man, it's on every bike I own. But this is the first time we've seen Ultimate brought to the code lever. Now, the calipers, it's worth noting, have remained the same. Let's be honest, the existing 4-pot code caliper are ridiculously good. Why change them? Maybe something's coming along in the future, but right now they're amazing. Let's chat about the lever. Chris mentioned that the kind of main memo from the design team was to neaten up the cockpit and the cable management, to further emphasize, even though there's only 2 cables if you're running an Axis drivetrain, they really want to neaten up that cockpit. Yeah, tell us a bit about the new levers.
Yeah, so we were kind of surprised to just see the new levers and not a whole new brake system, but as you mentioned, this is not so much a performance upgrade as it is ergonomics, as well as, you know, keeping things stealth. So these are denoted as the Code Ultimate Stealth line of brakes, and they, by name, by nature, these things are completely hidden out of the way. I didn't fully appreciate how much of a difference this made on the trail until just recently, having ridden them for a couple of months now. So obviously it's quite a striking design feature with the master cylinder body tucked up underneath the handlebars there. They've got some neat clips that are optional to run, but I've got them mounted on this bike to keep the cables tight up under the stem. And it wasn't until probably a couple of weeks into owning the bike or having the bike that I fully appreciated how much difference it made not having any cables flapping around, whether it's 2 cables, 4 cables, 6 cables, however many they're mounting on some bikes these days. With having no cables visible within your peripheral vision, it was just really astonishing. And, you know, sound, bike noise, clutter, all that type of thing is one thing, but from physically not being able to see any cables moving around, like it really has made a massive difference. And now I jump back onto a bike, whether it's, you know, nice neat cables, but 4 of them, or, you know, a bird's nest clutter like we received on some bikes, it's quite off-putting, to be honest. And yeah, I've done myself a bit of an injustice having ridden this so early.
It's an interesting point Blake mentioned. That's why I stood up just to kind of give another glance. Now, the design cue of these levers, essentially the cable now is positioned to head right back towards the bar. It might have cables running through the headset, so it's going to neaten all that. And it just aesthetically looks pleasing, which is, when we first rode the bike down in Tassie, that's sort of the takeaway I had from it. Like, well, essentially the internals are more or less the same, looks a little tighter. What I didn't realize is there's a very interesting point that Blake has risen there, and that is when you're riding and your whole focus is going on what's in front of the trail coming towards you, if there's any clutter, and obviously cables, even though there's only 2 instead of 6 or whatever we might have had, starts interfering with peripherals, and that does take away a small part of your focus. When I look down across Blake's dashboard here, or his cockpit, there's no cables in sight. So my entire focus, if I'm gonna be riding this bike, is gonna be exactly on what's coming up. It's not gonna be interrupted with any little cable. So I think that might be one of the most genius parts of this new lever design. Yeah, it cleans everything up when you're looking in the shop or in your garage, but really when you're riding, it takes those cables completely off the table. Man, I reckon that's genius.
100%. And in the same sort of theme with the derailleur of keeping a few parts of the derailleur material brushed or, you know, raw aluminium, they've done the same thing on the top of the lever body there. So, you know, it's inevitable we're all going to throw our bike down the trail accidentally at some point, but the highest point on those brake lever bodies is just raw aluminium. So there's no anodizing really to scratch off or anything like that, keeping them looking fresh and new.
It's just cool that SRAM are focused on durability. Like, a lot of brands want shit to look as cool as it can. If it gets ratty, then they just get maybe
100%.
another sale. But these guys really want durability. They ride their bikes hard. They want to keep riding as much as possible and not miss any trail rides. So yeah, big kudos, I'd say, for these innovations in 2023. Now, one thing, people sitting at home, everyone loves to maybe not be a skeptic, but want to get down to the nitty gritty. Is there anything we found that it fell short? Was there anything that we reckon they could have redesigned, or maybe any misses? I guess, yeah, did you drop the chain? Was there anything like that that kind of stumbled across in the last 3 months? Obviously a lot of riding.
A lot of riding, yeah, a lot of riding. It's a big travel bike as well. It's not like we've just been, knocking around on the cross-country trails. I've really enjoyed the bike as a whole, the Nomad itself. So I've really, thrived on pushing its limits as well as mine. And I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit nervous. I'm a chain guide guy, I always have been. We were promised that we weren't going to drop a chain. I've dropped chains previously with some of the lower spec SRAM group sets, if I'm completely honest. I was nervous to sort of ride this thing as much as I have been without a top guide at least. I haven't dropped a single chain. I haven't had a misshift, anything like that. I've had the group set off the bike, reset it up myself. It really is as easy as Chris mentioned, or took us through the brief in our introduction video with it. To be honest, the only real downside that I can see of the group set, like performance-wise, I cannot fault it. I've tried faulting it, and I just cannot find anything. Probably the only downside to it initially is going to be that you cannot fit it to every bike. Your bike does have, or your frame has to be a SRAM UDH compatible bike. So it has a SRAM UDH derailleur hanger, which is SRAM have that all logged on their website. I think Chris,
hundreds and hundreds of bikes.
Hundreds of models of bikes already, and
tons of brands.
That list keeps growing. However, I'm sure that there's going to be outliers out there that may not accept that UDH platform. Even though for me it's a no-brainer. Like working in bike shops, derailleur hangers were a thing of a lot of frustration. So to keep everything the same is a no-brainer for me. But that's probably the only downfall.
You can't retrofit this on your bike 5-6 years ago with a traditional hanger.
No, you can't. Yeah.
That said, majority of new bikes coming out now, we're seeing more and more brands. It's such a common sense solution to have, and definitely brands from all across the world are embracing. We're going to see, I'd say, derailleur hangers are a thing of the past, traditional ones. You can see a lot more of this. So yeah, that is one maybe limitation of the system. But that said, getting back, hundreds and hundreds of different models still available right now. That's listed on SRAM's website. Maybe one small thing to keep in mind if you're looking to upgrade. Of course, the other thing we believe is that this new transmission and the 3 different spec levels is going to be coming on a lot of OE bikes, pretty much from the time of this launch right the way through the rest of the season. So we're going to be seeing a lot of this gear coming, a lot of opportunities to ride this stuff without having to build up a custom bike. Now, one thing, obviously, if someone's watching this video, they're probably going to know now, SRAM kindly provided us this bike, and it is decked out with some of the finest parts. Obviously, it all centers around a Santa Cruz Nomad frame, mullet wheel setup, decked out with that suspension. Mate, tell us a bit about how the bike overall rides, because I don't know if I've ever seen a better looking bike in my life.
Yeah.
I don't think there's one thing I would change personally if I owned it. It's pretty jaw-dropping. What's it been like to live with, and how good does this thing go?
This thing is an absolute spaceship. Yeah, I was pretty taken aback when we get to ride nice bikes all the time. So for something to really pull our attention and get me this excited, which I am spoiled in that aspect, but man, like every time I get jump back on it, like this thing is just crazy. Like you really can see why people Santa Cruz enthusiasts, or Santa Cruz in this aspect, but some of these high-end bikes, like once you ride one and you really get to experience it, it's like there's no real turning back. And as you mentioned, like if I was to build one of these bikes tomorrow, it would literally look exactly like this. Like I cannot fault anything on it at all. Full
dream list right there. Well guys, we hope you've enjoyed our in-depth review on SRAM's latest gear. If you have, give this video a like. If there's anything you'd like to know that we haven't touched on, or anything you'd like to know more of, feel free to leave a comment below. We'll be keeping an eye on that, especially over the next couple of weeks, answering some of those questions. Or if it's on social media, pop it in the comments below. We'll get back to that as well. Hope you're having a good day, and check out our channel for plenty more content coming in the future.